Hello, beautiful soul family. This is Tammy Brunk, and I wanted to come to you today with some insights and some reflections on this Venus and Capricorn cycle that we find ourselves in, with a bit of an overview and a framework. And the time that I'm speaking is a really powerful time because Venus has just disappeared into the beams of the sun. And this is the underworld phase of the larger Venus and Capricorn cycle that began in January, around January 10th of 2022. This cycle as a whole completes in August of 2023. So this is a period where Venus is helping us collectively to do this deeper work of composting or detoxing or healing and transforming the archetype of Capricorn. And to put it in a bigger frame, we have been in what I like to refer to as the Capricorn Crucible since about 2008, when Pluto moved into Capricorn, because Pluto is a planet that has everything to do with these kinds of really deep, all-encompassing processes of purification and transformation. Often we give the example of the chrysalis, the caterpillar going into the chrysalis and then becoming a butterfly. So this mysterious process where we go into the void, or we go into the darkest places, we go into a surrender process in order to die to the old self and be remade into something new. Now, understand that Capricorn carries culture. Capricorn is about the bones of our modern society. It has to do with our governing systems, has to do with the health system, the economic system, the political system, and on and on. And I mean this at a global context. So you can begin to see and feel that what we already know in our bodies and our nervous systems now, which is that beginning in 2008, this showed up with the housing bubble in the US and in many other dimensions all across the globe. But we've been in this process, the heart of this period of the kind of the dismantling, the taking apart, the purification and transformation, which feels like chaos before a new order, as we're in the heart of the shift from one epoch to another. This Pluto and Capricorn cycle is kind of at the heart of that. And Pluto will be in Capricorn until 2023, and then kind of moving in and out, I believe, even through 2024. So this is the heart of this deep societal, cultural transformation that we're in the midst of. It's not easy. It's not pretty. We know this. We feel this. And then if you want to really understand what this is about more fully in your system, take into consideration that in 2019 and 2020, we had other celestial bodies, the South Node, Saturn, Jupiter, all meeting up with Pluto in Capricorn in this massive, collection, like a council of all these planetary beings that are reflecting this larger, massive, now this is really the crucible, where Capricorn is undergoing the deepest restructuring and healing and releasing and composting and death rebirth process. So metamorphosis into the new form. So we're right in the heart of being in the chrysalis, you could say. So all of this is happening. We feel the intensity. It's another way to name the intensity we've felt in these last few years. And then we also have the Pluto return to the US natal chart, which is happening. We really began to feel it in 2021, and then in 2022, and then even through 2023, we're still feeling the reverberations of that. And what that means, because the US literally has Pluto in the sign of Capricorn when it was first created. And so this is a massive cycle for the US. And what that means is that the US is kind of at the heart, or the epicenter, of that needed massive change, cultural, societal change. This is why it can feel very dense and heavy to be here right now. It's also, I feel, important to recognize that we've each chosen to incarnate at this time. We've chosen to incarnate where we are, those of us who are in the US, and of course what happens here affects everyone. So we've all chosen to incarnate at this time for a particular purpose, to play a role, to be a part of the healing medicine at this moment. So we have all these Pluto activations, this Capricorn crucible, and in the midst of all of this, Venus begins her Capricorn cycle in 2022 as well. So we have this 1.5 year window that I see as being the astrological event that we collectively can most powerfully engage with to support in the necessary healing and regeneration and the deeper work that's needed to heal our society, to heal our culture at the root. And so within the Venus cycle itself, the first phase, morning star phase, is when we are collectively letting go, consciously. Well, I say consciously. If you work with the Venus cycle, you're conscious of it. Most of us are not. We're working, you can see unfolding around us a deeper surrendering or a letting go, like it or not, of the different layers or the different facets of that particular sign. So I'm going to stop here for a second to talk about Capricorn a little more. So it's important to see it in the collective and then also the personal. So at the collective level, Capricorn really carries patriarchy. It carries the frequency of the last 5,000 to 6,000 year age that we're coming out of, that has been featured by sometimes we call it the age of separation or the age of the patriarchal age. And what we mean when we say that is that this has been a time where the majority of humanity has forgotten I like to think of it like it's this deep, we've been in this last 5,000 to 6,000 years for about this amount of the time humanity has existed. And then the larger time that humanity has been here on the planet is about this deep. So, but in this period of time, we have managed to do something that I would imagine we have never experienced before. It's part of our evolution, which is to imagine that we are separate from the rest of the creation. This has been a strange kind of an individuation process that I feel has been necessary and part of our evolution. And yet we are coming to the end of that experiment. So now it's time to collectively remember that we are connected to all of life in this creation, connected to each other. So there's this whole mending of this time of separation that we're in the midst of, and it's happening very, very rapidly. So it's a very exciting time to be alive. It's a very interesting time to be alive. So at the personal level, the way Capricorn can be experienced, and this has the roots of even in the most recent expression of it has been emerging through the Pisces age and the monotheistic religions that emerged through that age. And so with these religions, the challenge of these times is that there has been born this idea of original sin. And so when I think of the roots of the wounds of Capricorn that are needing healing right now, it has to do with this foundational feeling of shame, or that there's something wrong with us just in our foundational nature, that we are bad. There's something wrong with us as a species. We've been told this, and I would say told to control us. But it's an aberration. It's not true. So there's this feeling that this is why the Dalai Lama, when he came to the West, because it's so prominent in the West, even though it's infected everyone else too. When the Dalai Lama came to the West, because he comes from a culture that has deeper roots, and he encountered this idea of self-hatred, which is actually far more common here in the West than it is in the East, given that the East has its own expression of patriarchy. That his translators couldn't translate that to him. They couldn't translate, what is this self-hatred? What does that mean? He couldn't understand. And finally, when he sort of got it, he's like, but how is that possible? Because you're divine. Like, how can you hate yourself? That doesn't make sense. So of course, the Dalai Lama is coming from a deeper root of a culture that still has some remembrance of what the sacred human originally was. But many of us, this is why Brene Brown is so popular with her shame work. It's so big to look at the shame work right now, because this has to do with the heart of what needs healing in our larger culture. And it is Capricorn territory: guilt, shame, this feeling of unworthiness, this feeling that no matter how hard you work, you can't get it done. workaholism, doing addiction. It's those puritanical ethics that would say that you don't even exist. You don't matter unless you're producing something. There's a distortion that causes us to be deeply diminished of our soul essence when we buy into or we believe this larger cultural story that surrounds us everywhere. So themes of scarcity, of vast inequalities between peoples, of this idea of the dog eat dog kind of survival orientation and world. This is not the original essence of Capricorn, mind you, but these are the layers that Capricorn has accumulated as part of its evolution, because Capricorn carries the overculture, or Capricorn carries the guidelines or the laws or the rules or the institutions of the culture, even though that's not necessarily the original essence of Capricorn, because we've been living through an age that's upside down. So this is what Pluto's been helping us to heal and release, and it's messy as every birth is. But in the Venus cycle, we have an opportunity collectively to do an even deeper layer of healing and clearing of the Capricorn mysteries. So in the morning star phase, there's a deeper dismantling, an unveiling, a lightening of the load, a healing of the lineages of Capricorn. I will also say that some of the other territory of Capricorn has to do with ancestral healing, healing of our spiritual and blood ancestries, or karma clearing. These are all themes of what it means to heal Capricorn. And here in the US and across the globe as well, there with that ancestral healing, it also, Capricorn has a great deal to do with the original elders and honoring the original elders. One of the ways to understand this is to see that, when my teacher, Daniel Giamario, who brought forward the shamanic astrology paradigm, when he was first studying Capricorn, this was at a time in traditional astrology where they would say that Capricorn and Saturn, which is the planet that's resonant with Capricorn, that they represented the father or the patriarch. Saturn and Kronos, if you want to understand this more deeply, Kronos, of course, was the god like Saturn who ate his children. So this speaks to some of the distortions of the patriarchal model. And so at that time, Daniel was seeing this as the representation of Capricorn, and he started to recognize and tune into the reality that there was a core essence to each of the signs that goes far deeper than the way they're expressed over this kind of traumatic experience that they've had over the last 6,000 years. So the question was, what's the original essence of Capricorn? And when you get to that, then it has to do with asking questions like, what are some of the original forms of governance that actually serve the people and the earth? What you ask these questions about Capricorn, how is it that we use to structure our societies? What in a healthy society would it mean to be a happy, healthy, engaged community citizen? What would that look and feel like? So in a collective sense, these are some of the questions Capricorn asks. And so at that time, Daniel had gotten the transmission that the circle of the grandmothers was the new emergent archetype that we serve at the turning of the ages when we're working with Capricorn. So it's the elder wisdom, and it's specifically the elder wisdom that emerges from societies that are deeply rooted into the earth and who have a concern for the future generations. So he looked at the model of the Haudenosaunee, or the better known as the Iroquois, though they do not call themselves that anymore, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy that was hugely influential to Benjamin Franklin and other founders of the US Constitution, because their society was very egalitarian. It had systems of checks and balances. It actually had consensus making as the way that they made decisions, so more evolved than we are for sure. But they had many features, many facets of their society that worked very well, were adopted into our Constitution. However, there were two elements that were not adopted, and one was the concept that any law that you make needs to take into consideration how it affects the future generations. Number two was that at the top of the decision-making hierarchy was the circle of the grandmothers or clan mothers. These were wise women who had, as I always see it, their roots were most deeply rooted down into the matrix of their ancestral lineage, such that they could draw up the greatest wisdom from all the generations that came before. And they also had the capacity, they had the far-seeing eye to be able to understand whether a rule, or if they were to go to war, any of these other decisions, how that would affect the next generations, the future 7 generations. So these wise women were the top of the hierarchy. So Daniel had the recognition that that was a very beautiful and true expression of what the authentic original core essence of Capricorn and even Capricorn governance really looked like. So it was feminine. It had a feminine flavor. It cared for the earth. It was a society that was balanced and that cared about the future, and that was a wise culture. And so that's just one way to look at the original essence of Capricorn. So then we might say that what all of this Capricorn Crucible, and then with Venus at the heart of it, is doing for us, and specifically here in the US, first of all, anytime Pluto's involved, or even Venus in her descent and underworld phase, it's for us to face the shadow. It's for us to do the shadow work, which means that we need to be willing to illuminate and to see and look at the aspects of the self, of the society, of the larger age that we're in, that are that we haven't been wanting to look at. Maybe it's too painful, or maybe we've just forgotten. So they're the layers that we have been kind of setting aside or pushing aside for one reason or another. So we have to face what's in the shadow. So this is why over the last, since, especially during the Capricorn Crucible, with everything that's been happening during the George Floyd kind of awakenings that happened in the wake of his death, what we've been seeing and feeling more deeply, and people are waking up in mass to the societal imprint, the dark societal imprint of slavery here in the US, and of genocide of indigenous peoples here in the US as well. And so there's been this emerging of an awareness of the shadow, and of the layers of our society that are not tenable, that we can no longer, it's like when in the time of a human being, when we come to a phase in our lives where we say, oh my, look at what I've done in my life that is not, that has caused harm to those around me or to the earth around me. And it's time to acknowledge, and it's time to make a clear, firm choice to make a change. So that's where we find ourselves right now, is at that place where we're seeing as a society the layers of our culture that we're grieving them. First and foremost is to actually see and to grieve and to acknowledge, bear witness to, listen to the stories of people of color, of immigrants, of indigenous peoples, of African American people, to be willing to see clearly and hear the stories and understand the histories of what's happened, so that we can recognize within our own bodies and nervous systems the deep necessity to make change. Now, after recognizing what we've been doing to each other as a human family, the deeper layer of what we're also coming into reckoning around, as we all can see, is what we've actually been doing to our beloved Mother Earth, the matrix of our own being. And we see this, of course, through the impacts of climate change and of widespread disappearance of species, and the many ways that we've been diminishing her body. And we see this in the way that women's bodies are treated. We see this in the way that men are expected to not have hearts, to not have feelings, to also have their bodies not be respected and honored and cherished in the way that our children have been raised to expect, especially in the US, to expect violence in the place where they go to learn. So I'm not going to give more examples, because I think it's so searingly clear that the way our society has been operating, it's not working, and it's so clear that it's breaking down. And so Venus in Capricorn is a part of that. So what can we do in the cycle? So first of all, again, just to understand that in the Venus Capricorn cycle, this is a phase of time where we're invited to personally, I think I would say begin personally, to see where those systems of oppression live inside of our systems, our ecosystems. And again, so I think that that has a lot to do with locating the places where we go into self-abandonment or self-rejection, or we have that inner kind of patriarch who lives inside of us, who is continually that voice in our head that tells us we're not enough, we need to do more, that we're not precious, we're not beautiful, we're not whole just in and of ourselves. That layer of the consciousness is toxic, and it diminishes our light. It diminishes the sacredness of who we are. So it has to do with that. It does also have to do with coming into a soft-hearted place of self-compassion, and coming into a soft-hearted place of a willingness to see and recognize how much how what it has done to our hearts to be separate from each other, to separate ourselves from those who maybe don't look like us, or who've had an experience that feels more painful on some level, or to separate ourselves from the earth herself. Um, so this is a time where, and some of it's not conscious, I'll just say some of it is just a process we're in. So it's surrendering. The key word is surrender when we're in this descent and underworld phase. So this is a time for us collectively to dip into the deeper roots of who we are as a sacred human, to look deeper into our own ancestry and ask, where is that deep root? Who are those whole healed ancestors? And what even is the core essence within my own body, my own womb, my own hara, if you're a man, or if you're non-binary and you don't have a womb? Where do I find that root of the original essence of who I am and the original essence of my culture? And so this is a time where we're doing that work. We can do that in dreams. We can do that with research. We can do that by simply feeling it, or asking the questions, or even speaking to our whole healed ancestors. So ancestral healing is a part of it. And the other layer that to me feels absolutely essential in the US especially, and I think for most of us, is to if we're going to talk about, if we're going to open into asking, what does an original culture look like that is healthy, that is whole, that is going to help us to mend what's happened before? We can learn very much from the indigenous peoples who are still here, and the indigenous peoples who have been here, learn from their stories, learn from their teachings. And we also, from my view, can honor them through doing things like land acknowledgements. The other thing I think we can do is we can honor the original elders even beyond the human form, and honor the elders, meaning I had 2 days before the equinox here, we had swarms of dragonflies coming through our fields, just beautiful migratory patterns. And I was feeling them, and I was recognizing those are our ancestors, those are our elders. They've been here for 300 million years. So it's for us to begin to really deeply listen to the land, and deeply listen to the beings on the land, all of our larger family of life, and to really spend time with them, spend time reconnecting and beginning to co-regulate our own nervous systems, our own bodies with the larger earth body. And when we do that, we will be shown, I'm clear that we will be shown what the original essence of human culture really was. And so we can dream a new culture into being, but we can only do that when we reweave ourselves back into the fabric of the creation. So I'm saying all of this. This is what I suspect is going on in this Venus and Capricorn cycle. As I speak, we've just entered the underworld. And so this is a phase, this is a time for us collectively to be in the mystery, to be humble, to really be listening and in a surrendered place to ask, how is it that I can be? So I would say, even as a human, as an individual, based on your personal history, your life, I'll say this for myself, what I am speaking into is to finally heal those aspects of my psyche, of my consciousness, of my being, to unplug from the patriarchy on the level that I let go of this feeling that I have to prove myself in order to be worthy. that I have to, that who I am and my value has to do with how much money I make or what I do in the world or, um, what the color of my skin is or any of those things. This is irrelevant because we are first and foremost beings of soul. We are all beings of soul. And now that we've entered the underworld, it feels so clear to me. This is the place of ensoulment. This is the place where we meet our souls. And so we do that personally, and then collectively, we also are meeting the original soul of the sacred human. What does she look like? What does he look like? What do they look like? What do they feel like? And so this is a time of great mystery. So this is my take. And I'd be really curious for those of you listening. How do you feel this Venus and Capricorn cycle? What is it that you personally have been releasing? How is it that you're experiencing this deep letting go and lightening of the layers of toxicity or shame or not enough or I don't belong or even more so, I think at the core, it's the feelings that we've touched with COVID, the deep feeling of separation and isolation and alienation from ourselves, from our heart, from our soul, from each other, from our human communities, and from the rest of the creation. So this is a time to mend that. And I will just finally say, at the heart of this initiation, we have Venus meeting the sun at Kazemi, that's the goddess on her crown, on her throne, remembering who she truly is as a matriarch of heart, a sacred human in service to all beings on the planet, in the cosmos. And that they are going to meet at 29 degrees Libra. And so this is the time of peacemaking. And then the last thing I'll say is that I am most deeply inspired by the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy, and part of what inspires me about them is that they had lived through a time much like our own, where the peoples were deeply divided, where they were incredibly violent. According to some sources, they had resorted to cannibalism. And you could say that in our current age, we are also cannibalistic of our young, of the future generations. It sounds harsh, but it feels very true. And so the Haudenosaunee were coming from a time of great distortion and where the culture had been degraded and human being spirits were very low. And at this time, there was the peacemaker who arrived, and he enlisted Hiawatha, who you may have heard of, to be his proxy, to speak for him. And he also worked even first before that with a feminine figure, Jigon Sasi, who could be seen even as an indigenous Mary Magdalene figure, who was the one where she was the mother of nations. She was the one where even before the great law of peace that was created through the efforts of the peacemaker Hiawatha and Jigon Sasi, even before this was accomplished, she was gathering each of the tribes, the 5 warring tribes. She created a space big enough for all of them. She had a heart large enough for all of them to come and all of them to have a neutral ground. So my feeling is that Jigon Sasi is the goddess who we find at the heart of the underworld journey in this Venus initiation cycle, the mother of nations, the mother of the new and ancient nations who will be born from this Venus in Capricorn cycle. And one last thing is that a similarity between the time of the Haudenosaunee and our own time is that at the time of according to many sources, at the time of that these 5 warring tribes came together and created a great confederacy and a great law of peace. They had come together to create this just after a massive eclipse had passed through their territories in 1142. And we ourselves as well, here in the Americas, are in the crucible with the US at the center. We are all also going through a series of eclipses that crisscross our territories from 2017 to 2024. And so this is a time for us, like the Iroquois, to set, and with Venus at the heart of the sun at 29 Libra, this is our time to make peace. It's a time to make peace with the different warring factions inside our own hearts. It's a time to make peace with those humans in our realities and our communities who we have been at war with. It is a time to make peace with our own relationship with the land. And it is a time as well, I feel, to make peace with the original indigenous peoples on the lands wherever we live, and to offer our love, to offer our apologies, and to offer our heartfelt and honest desire to mend the split that we have, and also to the Mother Earth herself. It's time for us to make peace with what we've done, and so that we can and to forgive ourselves. I think this is absolutely essential. This isn't about shame. This is about actually facing what we've already been feeling in our heartbreak. This is about facing what's already been there, and so that we can come into a place of loving ourselves again, remembering ourselves as sacred humans, remembering our place of being in service to all life. So with that, I wish you the most beautiful, potent Venus and Underworld phase. It's lasting from about September 18th until December 2nd. So this is a window of time where we get to be in a phase of allowing, surrendering to the natural healing that wants to occur for us, the natural falling away of any of those patterns of overworking, of overdoing, of trying to prove ourselves, of separating ourselves from life. This is a time to lay that down. So with so much love and hoping that this is of service to you, this is Tammy Brunk, Earth Sky Woman.